I think this plays into Democrat hands because this allows them to continue the January 6th, our democracy is under siege charade, right? Oh, they tried to overthrow Joe Biden and not allow him to ever become president. And what's the first thing that the Republicans do when they get back control of the House? They immediately impeach him. Republicans are the threat to democracy. Now, you and I know that that's not true, but with all of the media allies that are out there, I don't think that you gain personally by impeaching Joe Biden because it doesn't go anywhere. I wanted to share this with you, though, because, Buck, it's amazing how stories get buried in the grand scheme of things, even if they are conducted by the Washington Post and ABC. Usually the Washington Post covers everything with a fine-tooth comb Trump-related, but I found this really fascinating. So in the Washington Post ABC poll over the weekend, a lot of you probably didn't hear about this because it didn't receive very much coverage because it was so overwhelmingly favorable to Republicans. First of all, generic ballot, likely voters, Republicans with a 5-point lead. That is like 1994, 2010 level dominance. Again, generic ballot, Republicans 51, Democrats 46 among likely voters. And Democrats now are behind Republicans. I thought this was interesting, Buck, because we like to say on this show, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes in that things can be very similar. Republicans right now have the largest lead on who is going to solve crime issues over Democrats since 1991. Let me repeat this. Crime is such a disaster nationwide for Democrats that Republicans now have a 31, I think I'm doing the math right because it's getting to be a while back in the 90s, 31-year lead over which party is going to better respond to crime.
Can I say, Clay, I'm wondering if you feel this way too. The numbers are stark, clear, obvious that we have suffered because of Democrat policies. We have suffered more as a country from murder, rape, theft. You go down the list. Every major crime, car theft, carjacking, home invasion, all the way down to, simple theft, stealing from stores, people engaged in the more lower day-to-day crimes. But what I think really hammers it home for people is you cannot go on social media right now for more than a day without seeing some broad daylight usually, but just brazen, heinous, vicious crime. And it is not by MAGA hat wearing January 6 insurrectionists. And you see a crime committed and you say, what is the situation here? And you find out when you read the headlines or you read it when it makes its way into the news that this is a person who's been arrested 50 times or 30 times or whatever the case may be. And I think because there's video and because we see it, people have this reaction to this is disgraceful. We are a better country than this. And also, we're all sick of walking around wondering, am I going to get hit in the face with a brick by some maniac who's been walking around, urinating on the streets and shouting at people for the last week? Because that happens in places like New York all the time.
This is what I shared last week, Buck. I don't remember ever having a conversation with my wife about which gas station to use, but crime has become so omnipresent all over America, cities, rural areas, suburbs, that as a father and as a husband, I think about it way more involving my kids and my wife than I ever have before. And you're probably a lot like me, Buck. You don't worry as much if you're a grown man about yourself.
I worry about the females in my life. Yes.
That's
my
right.
Sister, my mom, and my fiance. That's who I worry about.
So when you are having those conversations, it registers. And it doesn't just register, Buck, with obviously men who tend to vote Republican far more. I think it's registering with moms out there in the suburbs who are a lot of these swing voters. And I wanted to hit you with this too. Who do you trust to handle this issue the most? Economy, Republicans plus 16. Inflation, Republicans plus 19. Crime, as I said, biggest trust issue for Republicans since 91, according to the Washington Post, plus 14. This ballot, this poll among likely voters, Buck, didn't see this splashed on the front page of the Washington Post in a big way. Trump has a 2-point lead over Joe Biden, 48-46 among likely voters as well. Again, this is the Washington Post, ABC. It ain't a poll that's likely to be inclined to be favoring Republicans, and they buried it because the numbers were so devastating as we sit here 43 some odd days out.
I know this isn't important. We're talking about important stuff. This isn't super important, but it has been crossing my mind lately. So if it does turn into Trump v. Biden, which you just mentioned that poll, if it is this rematch, this straight up rematch of 2020, does CNN hire back Brian Stelter, move Don Lemon into prime time? Do they all of a sudden go, oh, just kidding, we're not a news network, we're actually the anti-Trump platform for the DNC? I mean, because that's how they made all their money. That's how they got all their ratings for years, and now they're moving away from it. Think about the pivot that they would have to make. Again, I know we got bigger fish to fry, but I do think all of a sudden we might have Stelter be like, that's right, I'm back and in prime time if Trump runs. One criticism that I know a lot of people on the right have of their elected representatives is our side lacks the discipline, unified discipline of the other side on political issues. You know, they can count on whether it's the passage of Obamacare or now the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, or you name it, or impeachments of the president, which is where we're going here. Democrats all in lockstep. And also, it seems like our side is not as willing, the Republicans are not as willing to just roll up their sleeves and really throw some punches. People are talking about we're going to have a Republican House here, and the Democrats have. It is a true thing to say that Democrats have now made impeachment a purely political tool used to effectively harass a president in office that you don't like, right? I mean, they did it twice. They did it after the Trump presidency, even the second time. The whole thing is crazy. What are they even doing? Chuck Todd brought up the possibility of the GOP impeaching Biden next year. Here's what he said.
Can't get over the first thing you said, which you said it's very likely that we're going to see impeachment votes. I mean, is this good for the Republican Party that the first, basically they take over the House and then hold impeachment votes on Biden? Does that not just continue everything that they claimed that the party had been claiming they were pushing back against?
If that happens, I do believe it's divisive, which is why I've pushed back on it personally when I hear folks saying they're going to file articles of impeachment in the House. I've pushed back against those comments because we need to be working together.
Well, can I just notice the way it's framed? Well, they say that they're not into doing these kinds of things, so isn't that then going against what they used to say they didn't want to do? Yeah, but that was before they impeached Donald Trump twice, right?
For me, my thing on impeachment is unless you have a realistic chance of getting to 67, it's just a boring sideshow.
Oh, but this is all about the optics, right? They don't think that they don't think they're actually going to get removal. It's just impeach a president. So Biden's impeached too. It now becomes a stain on the record.
Well, I think you just impeach. Everybody gets impeached from now on. And again, to me, it's just a huge sideshow because unless you have 67 votes in the Senate to be able to remove a president, what the House does doesn't really matter. I do think Mayorkas and Merrick Garland have been so incredibly bad at their job in the cabinet, in particular Merrick Garland based on the raid on Trump, and certainly Mayorkas just based on the border, although you could argue that all he's doing is implementing the instructions of his leader. If it's not going to remove, I would rather focus personally, Buck, on the COVID failures and Dr. Fauci.
I'm with you on all that. I mean, but remember, they're not going to be able to pass any legislation, and it would give an opportunity. I'm going to be very clear. It's an abuse of the process. But here's the question. How do you respond to the abuses of the process that Democrats have normalized and now done multiple times against Trump. I mean, I can pose the question, again, little devil's advocacy here, a little getting over the edge with this stuff, but I
Would
think
you vote for it? That's the question. If you were a congressperson and they said, "Hey, Buck Sexton, what should we focus on?" Do you think we should impeach the president?
I think it depends on what we're going to. I think it depends. I think you could say that it is impeachable based on the standard that Democrats have set for Joe Biden to effectively nullify immigration law in this country and just act like federal law doesn't actually count anymore when it comes to immigration. Now, maybe there are other areas people want to focus on. Fine. But, I mean, I would put it to you this way as well. What is the certainty in your mind that either a Trump or DeSantis or Youngkin or whoever, right, but the next Republican president in their first 4 years will be impeached? I would put mine at 100%. I think this is what Democrats do now.
Assuming that they have control of the House.
Yes,
at some
of course,
point,
right. But if Democrats have the votes.
I'm not sure that they would. I think Republicans in 24 are going to have the House and the Senate.
I should have set up the. I'm just saying, when Democrats have the votes to impeach a Republican president going forward, do you think they will refrain from it?
I think it's going to become very common. Here's what I would say in terms of, does it play well politically? I think this plays into Democrat hands because this allows them to continue the January 6th, our democracy is under siege charade, right? Oh, they tried to overthrow Joe Biden and not allow him to ever become president. And what's the first thing that the Republicans do when they get back control of the House? They immediately impeach him. Republicans are the threat to democracy. Now, you and I know that that's not true, but with all of the media allies that are out there, I don't think that you gain personally by impeaching Joe Biden because it doesn't go anywhere. And it just further allows them to argue, oh, but imagine if they did have control of the government, our sacred institutions are under attack, and look at how quickly they made this move. That's what I think the storyline would be. So I think it's a net negative. I would go after Fauci with everything that I have because I think he's responsible for much of certainly our COVID response, but also I still want to know how COVID developed, and we still don't know, and how much American taxpayer dollars might have been involved there. And I would go after the 87,000 IRS agents with everything.
You're basically going to have a GOP majority in the House that talks about policy they would implement in 2 years if, when, and does a bunch of hearings. I mean, look, I'll say this. The Benghazi hearings that, it was good for some people's future cable news careers, but didn't do anything. Yeah. And the GOP got very focused in on that.
I mean,
so
what's January 6th done? The positive of a Republican Congress is not what they're going to be able to put into law. It's what they're going to keep Joe Biden from being able to put into law. I wish we'd had one the last 2 years. Maybe we wouldn't be sitting at 8.3% inflation.
Yeah, I mean, I generally don't like the eye for an eye view of politics when it involves breaking unspoken norms. But I'm a little more open to it now that I've been in the past. I'll say after
I think there's a lot of
after
people.
2 impeachments of Trump, I'm just like, how do we correct this unless we show them that we're willing to do the same to them as they do to us? That's the problem.
The impeachments of Trump actually bother me way less, Buck, because it's so inherently political, and I think everybody can see it, than the Mar-a-Lago raid does. Because crossing the Rubicon of raiding like Merrick Garland did, to me, is a bigger deal than impeaching Trump twice, because that was just so innately political. You knew how it ended. Like, they're legitimately trying to put him in prison.
The libs talk about, the Democrats talk about democracy dies in darkness, and the threats to our sacred institutions. All the fastest way, the easiest, fastest way to destroy democracy in this country is to have a Department of Justice that will lock up. Only have to do it to one. Lock up a political opponent that threatens the regime. That's it. It's over.
That is the actual threat to democracy, which is why all of these arguments about our sacred democracy are so patently and transparently lies, because virtually no Democrat has in any way that I've seen spoken out against what Merrick Garland did with his Department of Justice at Mar-a-Lago.